Do you find yourself struggling with feeling joy, especially when you look around yourself and see everything that you have? Well, this episode is for you. My name is Dara Thomason, and this is episode 178, the Quilters Coach podcast. And we're talking about feeling joy. I like to start off the podcast with wins of the ladies in the membership and how the ripple effect affects their family because they're doing the work. I have a client who just thought, wouldn't that be a good idea to do a album of all the things we did this year, or a themed album? And so she was going through pictures of this past year, and she was just amazed at how differently she looks at herself now. So in the past, when she would take a look at a picture of herself, she would get really mad, would feel frumpy. She was just very critical of herself. As she was looking over the pictures and the experiences, just was able to see how blessed she really is. She was much less critical and judging, and she was able to feel so much joy. I absolutely love that. In fact, that's one of the reasons I want to share this podcast. Working with her and seeing this transformation, it's not just for her, it's for all of us. And I wanted to share some tools and ways that we can do that. Listen up. And if you're watching, hello. If you're listening, hello. And if you're watching, you can see the worksheet that I'm going to be working from. And if you're listening, you can just download the worksheet. I have a worksheet for every podcast because I know for my brain, it really helps me to be structured that way. So I want you to ask yourself, how often do you feel joy? Been recently, as my husband was talking about joy, the way that he defines joy is very different than how I define joy. So for him, joy is something that you don't feel very often. There's a really big buildup to it. It takes a while to feel it, and it's kind of a precious thing. Whereas for me, I feel joy all the time. I feel joy watching my kids excel at something. I have joy watching my kids work through something that's hard, and then they don't quit. I see joy in so many little things, and that's just because I have a different way of thinking about joy. So I would like to offer for all of you is to decide, how would you even define joy? What is it? As you think about it, I want you to ask yourself, how often do I allow myself to feel joy? And this is a really good question, because what it's doing is it's directing your brain to looking at things but being really clear. So even on the call with my client, we had to look up some definitions of words. So when she could say, like, what do I feel? And how is that? So just a simple definition of joy. The noun is a feeling of great pleasure and happiness. So we can have tears of joy. Or a verb would be to rejoice. Like, I felt shame that I had ever joyed in this discomfiture or pain. So, we have lots of different people have different definitions of joy. So for example, a feeling of great pleasure or happiness that comes from success, good fortune, or a sense of well-being, gladness. What about a source of a cause of keen pleasure or delight? If you want to go to deep meaning of joy, joy is a deeper emotion than happiness that comes from within, from a sense of purpose and meaning, including finding meaning in suffering, and from relationships with others. It therefore lasts longer than its counterpart. It's also relatively independent from happiness, according to certain people. As you can see, it's a very simple search can feel a little bit confusing. So even from a psychologist, they define joy as a pleasant state that shares conceptual space with other positive emotions such as gladness and, to a lesser extent, amusement. And then we have God's definition of joy, and we have all these different types of joy. I am curious for you. How would you define joy? Are you allowing yourself to feel that? Are you allowing yourself to have that intense happiness or pleasure? You want to define it. There's these 4 concepts that I really wanted to talk about, and just helping you to work through this concept of feeling joy. So the first one is confirmation bias. I always give the example of yellow cars. So if I was to have a conversation with someone and say, oh man, there's so many yellow cars, And you could think, oh, I don't know about that. But then when you start driving, what are you going to notice? Of course, the yellow cars. What was it? It was secular. I didn't know that word before. And then it seemed like everywhere I turned, I kept hearing the word secular. Thought I didn't even know what this word meant before. And now I'm hearing it everywhere. It's because now our brain has awareness of it. Just like with my client, when she used to feel really bad about herself, she would look at a picture and say, oh, look at that belly, or oh, look at those cheeks. And that was just her brain was looking for all the flaws and the imperfections instead of the other way around. I'm curious for you, how often do you allow your brain to only focus on one thing and find evidence for that one thing? Because if that's the case, then you're feeling a lot of discouragement, probably, and a lot of unhappiness. That's a really important tool just to be aware of. Now, the second tool that I want to offer to you to help you to feel more joy is to record it. So, making a record of the times when you feel joy. So if we are always going on autopilot, we are going into that habit brain, right? And the problem with default thinking is that it's running its course and we don't have a lot of impact or influence on what that course looks like. Living intentionally and on purpose, deciding, what do I want? What feels good for me? And I call this my anchor journal. And me, it's a time when I know that God is in my life. So when you think about a boat in a storm, if you throw down the anchor, so despite all the crazy, it will stay where it needs to be. So for me, my anchor journal helps me to really focus on what things are the most important and also knowing I'm on the right track. Keeping this record, actually physically writing this down, is really helpful because it allows us to kind of see where we're at and gives that direction. The third tool that I want to offer to help you to feel more joy is to always measure backwards. So there's the book written by Dr. Benjamin Hardy with Dan Sullivan's, one of his concepts called The Gap and the Gain. So Dan Sullivan is a business coach with entrepreneurs, and he was coaching this one gentleman, and it seemed like no matter how often he met his goals, he was successful, he always found where it wasn't good enough. Finally, Dan just said, you're never, it doesn't matter what you accomplish because it's never going to be good enough. So he came up with this concept of measuring backwards, looking backwards and seeing, like, look at all the things that I have accomplished, look at how far I have come. And by doing that, then you're able to, like, step into your zone of genius. So, okay. And so I wonder, what would it be like to, for every time that you kind of fall into that trap of feeling like it's not enough, that you can step in and say, actually, let me see all the things that I have accomplished. Let's see how far I have come. And that's going to be super helpful. And then the last tool that I would like to offer to help you to feel more joy is to have equal airtime. So the acronym is EAT, which I love. And so when I will find myself, or when I'm with my clients, we'll do a thought download. And so a thought download is literally just writing down everything that's in your brain on a piece of paper. And then I'll ask them to write down, what are the emotions for each one of those thoughts. So they'll write down those emotions. And now I have them go back. So let's say they did 10 thoughts, and then they have, 10 different emotions. I said, now you classify what is a positive emotion and what is a negative emotion. And if they have 7 negative to 3 positive, that's not having an equal airtime in your own brain. So I will ask them to find 7 positive thoughts about that situation. And that's super, super helpful for them. So I am just going to offer that you can do these 4 simple tools to help you to feel joy. Now, in order to have a healthy, balanced life, there's always going to be the negative and positive. Always. There'll always be 50% positive, 50% negative. That's just the way things go. So I want you to decide right now on purpose to realize, yeah, you know what? To have a healthy, balanced life, I will have negative and I will have positive 50% of the time. But when you're aware of that, then that negative doesn't isn't such a big deal. It's just part of life. But when I am doing these renovations or when had a goal and didn't quite hit it, I will, instead of beating myself up and just drowning in, waiting in the negative, I can just allow the negative and say, oh, this is my day that feels really negative. Okay. I'm just going to allow it to be there. I'm not going to make a big deal of it and I'm going to move forward. So I'm really curious to hear your feedback on this one. I think that joy is one of way more available to us than we thought. When I was a school teacher, I had twin boys in my class, and their uncle was a jeweler, and they made me a ring one year, and I had them for 3 years, and the ring said joy, and they said, "Miss Bowie, you are joy. You bring us so much joy." And I have always that was just so sweet that they thought of me and they associated joy. And I hope that for all of you, direct your brain. You can live a life of intention and decide, I'm going to live a life where I'm going to allow joy. Because, it's very to not feel joy. It's very easy to focus on the negative and to see all the negative. And so to make that a practice, live a life of joy on purpose, such a great decision. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't wait to hear back from you on what your takeaways are from these trainings. I always love to hear from you. And it's just such a pleasure to know that I'm recording this and it's going to go all over the world and help so many people. And one of the things I do ask you is to share it with your friends or at least write a review. If you love this podcast, please write a review because it will gain more traction. It'll be shown to more people and we can help more people feel more joy. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.
If you aren't loving your current life and hear yourself saying things like, I should be happier, I should be getting more done, or question how productive and fulfilled you are, this podcast is for you. I'm Dara Thomason, a professional quilter turned life coach for quilters, where I show you how to overcome obstacles like perfectionism, people pleasing, overeating, overcomplicating life, so that you can really start to enjoy your life by learning and using tools for your brain to help you transform your everyday living. Are you ready to make these changes? I'm ready to help. Let's start your transformation one UFO at a time.